Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named I Hate What I Did in the relationship advice subreddit. The post is titled, I cheated on my fiance multiple times over 3 years. I'm taking full responsibility here, there is no excuse. We got together 5 years ago, we're still young, me F23 and him M26. I know a lot of people here will say, just break up and move on, you're both young, but we love each other too much and breaking up is not an option. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep him. A little backstory, my brother and I grew up in a very abusive home. My father was a drunk and we became people pleasers, addicted to new attention and always seeking new people. In my case, I became some sort of one could say, really low self-esteem. I'd get involved with anyone that could give me the slightest piece of attention, not because I was attracted to them, only male friends because the attention was so much better than female friends could give me, but I knew their true intentions. It didn't matter though, as long as I got my attention. Before him, I had one boyfriend who cheated on me, and I cheated on him for retaliation, so I was always very leery. When I met my fiance, everything changed. He was enough, the way he treated me like a princess and how he took care of me was just perfect. We had a bit of a rough patch at the beginning of the relationship because I was still in this male friend of mine is not hitting on me mode, but that was fixed quickly and we had the best 2 years of my life. I was crazy loyal to him. Every guy that would hit on me or even message me, I'd block and send the screenshot to him. He got a job at a modeling agency, got in touch with a lot of famous people and gorgeous women, started to travel a lot for business, and suddenly changed his cell phone password. He became friends with a girl that confessed her love to him, but he turned her down. I saw the messages. My brother saw him days later talking to her on the street, and that wrecked me. He convinced me nothing happened, but I was so tired of feeling like this. My phone was always there for him to check. He knew my password, and I had nothing to hide. One time I was checking his phone and he swiped it from my hand very abruptly. He was acting so suspicious and I was losing sleep over it. All my family, female friends, and acquaintances were taking me for a fool, saying he hangs out with models, of course he cheats. I was going crazy over this situation. I got a job in a hospital and when I told people there that I had a boyfriend who worked in a famous modeling agency, they all laughed. I became the running joke of the hospital. They would taunt me all the time, saying, "Where is your boyfriend?" Working with models, of course, and being loyal. I cried every day. Even my boss would make fun of me, saying, "Stop being stupid, he cheats on you and you look like a nun. You never talk to anybody, behaving like the perfect girlfriend. Put some makeup on, let people in a little. You're young, live your life." I never had any feelings for this guy, my boss. He was not pretty to me or anything, but once I followed his advice, he started to compliment me, saying how beautiful I was and we were always looking at each other. For me, it was like my old way was coming back. I wanted the attention, the compliments, the thrill of being a teenager again and meeting new people. One day, he kissed me and I kissed him back. We started to text each other a lot. Even though I knew in my heart my boyfriend cheated on me with some of the girls he worked with, I felt guilty and kind of used my boss as a way to get even. The was not good. He never made me orgasm on his own, and he was a jerk most of the time. But when my boyfriend was acting suspicious again, hiding his phone or saying I was crazy for thinking he was cheating, I would meet my boss. We had like 4 times, but only because I turned him down with excuses most of the time and kissed like 3 times. That was in the course of 2 months. Later on, the bigger boss there fired me and a bunch of people for unrelated reasons. He called me to his place a lot. I never accepted, and with time, we stopped talking. Just the occasional text here or there, but nothing flirty or anything. That became my life. Every time I felt like he was betraying me, I would fall into my old ways and seek male attention. In the same year that I was with my boss, months later, a friend of my mother started to hit on me. He got my number when she was sick and he was helping her out. We exchanged nudes and kept in touch for a while. The only reason we were not was because when we met for the first and only time, his kiss was the worst ever, and I couldn't keep up. I turned him down a lot when he asked me to Netflix and chill, but kept in touch occasionally until it ended. When my boyfriend was acting up again, I'd unblock some ex-fling of mine or someone I knew would hit on me. I cheated on him online the next year with 3 people for a short period of time since they would stop giving me the attention I wanted and sexting was the only thing they were down for. I got another job last year and physically cheated on him once again with a guy I kissed once when I was younger. We exchanged nudes, sexted, and I met him at his friend's house nearby. We had sex, but he finished in like 2 minutes. It was really frustrating. He washed up and came back, but I was kind of frustrated and in like 10 minutes I gave an excuse and left. He was always messaging me, so I blocked him. Remember the guy I cheated on my last boyfriend with? I unblocked him and we started to talk. At this time, I was 100% back in my old ways of seeking male attention. He was ill and never wanted to send me nudes the way I asked him, like shirtless since he was an aspiring bodybuilder and everything. His libido was down bad because of the medication, and he turned me down when I asked to have sex with him. We met 5 times, 3 on the bus. I'd go all the way back to the same bus stop I was just at to spend time with him. 1 on the train. Nothing happened, we just talked. And 1 nearby my house. He wanted to kiss me, but I refused since I was terrified of someone seeing us walking close to each other. But the times we kissed on the bus, his kiss was not the best, but I loved the attention. I love to remember the stories of when we were younger, etc. We tried oral on the bus for like 3 seconds, but his libido was totally off, so it was more kissing and talking than anything. When he was better, he called me to sleep with him, but I turned him down since he did the same to me. My boyfriend asked me to marry him and I said yes, but was feeling really guilty. Our relationship was weird because he was tired of me being so leery towards him and I was tired of feeling like he was betraying me. We were fighting a lot, so the wedding was postponed. We kind of gave up on the relationship. I got close to 0 attention from him and that was horrible. We had been together for like 5 years already and were always all over each other like rabbits. The sex was great, the best I've ever had, but at this period of time, we were like strangers. I was still working in the same place and there was a security guard that I knew when I was younger. We started to text each other a lot, but with him, it was different. The attention he gave me was very close to the type of attention my boyfriend used to give me. We talked about everything, life, problems, we shared a lot of stuff, and I started to miss him, think about him every day, and was in love. His kiss was really good, and we'd meet in an empty stairwell he knew. We went to a motel a couple of times. Even though the sex was really quick, he couldn't control himself, and in a very small private area, he was really thoughtful, funny. He took care of me and gave me the attention I wanted. We got together like 20 times over the course of 3 months, had sex on the stairwell 3 times and 2 times at the motel nearby the place we worked. He was married and had a baby daughter. I hated the fact that I was helping him destroy a family, and I was feeling beyond guilty because this time it was different. It wasn't about revenge anymore. I was thinking about him constantly, had like a strong crush, and loved the attention. I tried to end things with him a couple of times, but every time he'd text me and I refused, he would say, "If you don't come to the stairwell, I'll never talk to you again." And in my mind, it was like, I will tell my fiance about this and he will never forgive me for it. So I'll keep this other guy around for the attention. So I'd still meet occasionally, but nothing anymore. Out of the blue, my relationship with my fiance improved. He was the loving man I was crazy addicted to from the beginning of the relationship once again, and I was finally happy again, but really depressed and scared because now that our relationship was better, I was looking at the other man very differently. I didn't want anything with him, I wasn't attracted to him anymore. I confessed some of it to my fiance and it was really hard at first. I cried a lot, was very ashamed, and gaslighted most of it, but he was going through my phone like crazy and discovered some things. He broke up with me and I was desperate, selfish, and wanted some attention stability, so I started to lie to this other guy. But he was kind of tired of me since I was not giving him any attention when my relationship with my fiance got better again. So I saw myself alone with 0 attention. My fiance blocked me on everything. I decided to lie to this guy saying I loved him and wanted to be his girlfriend, but he sent me a 2-minute voice message saying, "You say one thing and do another, I'm tired, I can't trust you." I didn't respond. My fiance agreed to meet me and found out about this last conversation we had, and he was destroyed thinking I really loved him. I never for a second stopped loving my fiance. His wife also found out and got in touch with my fiance, and together they discovered everything about me and her husband. She backed some of what I told him, like the fact that her husband was 24, needed Viagra, and was a premature ejaculator. I told him about every other guy, even the ones he would never and could never discover on his own. I came 100% clean, and since then he agreed to give me another chance when he found out about the notes I wrote on my phone about how depressed I was because I thought he was cheating on me back in 2018 and 2019. I gave him every piece of detail he asked me, and since I made a fool out of him in front of the people I cheated on him with, I thought it was only kind of fair I made a public love gesture. I made a tattoo of his name on my wrist, gave no privacy, gave all my passwords, 100% patience for the ups and downs, changed my phone number, and deleted all social media. I accept that he will never be my legal husband since he said, I just can't go to my wedding dressed in a suit saying I love you in front of everybody to a girl who did this to me. And since the consequences of my acts will be forever on his mind, it's only fair that I'd have consequences that will last forever too. So I give up the dream of having children. I never got any evidence that he was in fact cheating on me, never could prove it, and right now I know he'll fuck other women in retaliation. I'm able to live with that for some time until he feels like a man again. He says he doesn't now. I want to know what more I can do to make this situation any easier. We both want to stay together forever. He is my best friend, and right now I'm certain that I will never cheat again. I don't want any attention from anyone but him. I am a horrible person, but I know I can change. I want to change, and I will change. I started therapy this last month. We spent some time apart, and that helped me to realize how much I love him. People who got betrayed, what can I do to show him even more that I'm willing to go through everything to keep him in my life? TLDR, abusive father, low self-esteem, formerly addicted to new male attention. Fiance works with models and was acting suspicious with his phone. Cheated on him for 3 years with like 8 guys online, physically and emotionally for retaliation. But I don't have any concrete evidence that he, in fact, cheated. User Big Buck said, you're a POS. Sorry, you don't just go cheating because you think he is cheating. You sit down and talk and get to the bottom of it. So he didn't cheat, but you sleeping with 8 other dudes? This man should leave you. You're 100% the jerk. User Joe Bush said maybe he was cheating, maybe he wasn't, but getting married and continuing this relationship will end in disaster. Deep down, you know he cheated. The fact that he was hiding his phone is a pretty big red flag, and you also know that you cheated and will cheat again the moment things aren't perfect. I know you don't want to hear that you should stay broken up, but it really is the right answer. You will never trust each other again. When there's zero trust, there's no relationship. User enjoying the post said, you want some real advice. Fine. You need to go without sex for like a year with anyone. This whole thing isn't about your doomed relationship. It's about you being depressed and fixing it with and attention. I'm not a therapist, but your hormone imbalance is screaming through this screen, even in the way you type. Therapy will help, but you have to do that work outside of therapy. Who cares if people find you pretty because all I'm reading is someone who's making herself uglier to feel better on the outside? I don't care if you love this man. I don't care who cheated on whom. Getting back together with a contingency that you can't get married or have kids isn't going to help your relationship. What the is there then? I mean, I'm child-free by choice, but you clearly aren't since it's your dream and your up head thinks it's acceptable to give up your entire future over your second boyfriend who refuses to marry you. Your relationship is already over. I don't know why he took you back. I cannot speak to his frame of mind, but this whole thing is a shit show, and only like 10% of couples survive infidelity. You are in no way mentally stable enough to hold a relationship because until you love yourself, you are incapable of loving him. I promise you that the only love you feel is that need for the attention he once gave you, and that is probably not going to return. So let yourself live unhappy for the rest of your life. That sounds like a good trade-off for the worst betrayal in the entire world. By the way, it's not the worst thing that will ever happen to anyone ever, and none of this matters because you're incapable of being in a healthy relationship, and you can't fix that while you're in a relationship. User Dav Lithium said, if you love him even one bit, you have to let him go. You have serious psychological problems. Therapy and bettering yourself should be your #1 priority. Despite what you claim about your love for your fiancé, you are a person driven by your impulses and insecurities, and the only thing you keep doing to him is wear him down. I honestly hope he has the guts to leave you if you don't, and that you get better with your mental health and past trauma. User Bad Karma said, my dear, you don't need a fiancé, you need therapy. You need to go fix yourself because interpersonal relationships are tough. You seem to so easily fall back on your behavior from your youth. You've betrayed your fiancé multiple times because you feel justified. What's to stop you from doing the same thing when you get married? Sounds like nothing, because even in a relationship where it's expected you would be faithful, you have a zero problem with betraying him. Work on yourself. The best way to do that is likely solo. This way you're doing it for yourself and not for the hope of something with someone else. This next post was made in the pro-revenge subreddit by a user named Salty Effect. The post is titled, "I ruined my ex-BF's life 20 plus years ago and I just made sure it stayed ruined. Sorry, this is a bit long. All names changed. Throwaway account for all the reasons. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake, M23, through mutual friends. He had already graduated and was planning to move to the opposite side of the United States for grad school, and I had already been making plans to move with friends only a 90-minute drive away from where he was moving to. We had so much in common, fell in love, and it really seemed like fate, both planning to move 3,000 miles and landing so close together. He had 2 sisters and a younger brother who were all awesome people, and I became instant friends with them as well. Because he was in school and I was working, I would usually go to him to hang out on weekends. He was renting a house with 2 roommates also in his program. We were young, so money was tight, but we had fun, went for taco dates, and spent a lot of time at his house where he was breeding and selling small animals. Jake was an animal sciences PhD student, so being around animals was normal and I loved it. I met and became friends with his advisor's wife named Mary, who worked in administration at the university. She is a lovely woman, and I would often have lunch with her when I went over on weekends. Jake was a teaching assistant or TA, and I met other people in the program and made friends with them faster than he did. After about 2 years of dating, I was at the house one day, lying in bed together in a state of some undress, and he said out of the blue he was concerned I'd been gaining weight and it made it harder for him to be attracted to me. No concern about my health, it was all about him finding me unattractive. I sat up and said, well then maybe you should make sure there is better food for me to eat than crackers and cheese when I come up on weekends. Even at 23, I didn't take that kind of BS. I had gained maybe 10 pounds since meeting him 2 years earlier and still wore the same size clothes. I wasn't going to engage in a fight about it. After all, it was his problem, not mine, so I asked him calmly, "So what is your solution to this?" He stared at me blankly and said, "Well, I guess that you should try to lose weight." And I said, "Nah, I'm not going to do that, so what are you going to do about it?" He said, "Well, I guess nothing. I wanted to let you know how I feel." And I said, "Cool, thank you." Put my clothes back on, went to sleep, and drove home the next day as usual. We kept dating, and about 3 months later, he called me and said he wanted to break up after close to 3 years. The reason, and I quote, "You don't know enough about science." He felt like he couldn't have a conversation with me about his work where he didn't have to use common names for animals instead of scientific ones. I said, "Well, that's bullshit. What's the real reason?" He said it was the real reason. He came to see me a month later to return something of mine, and I confronted him, demanding the real reason. He finally admitted he had been seeing one of his undergrad students, let's call her Meg, a 19-year-old. He was then 26 and her teacher. I screamed at him to leave, my roommate threatened to throw him off our second-floor balcony if he didn't go, and he left. It hit me all at once after he walked out, and I went from rage to stunned laughter. I'd met Meg a few times, and at one point she was at his house for a barbecue and spilled something all over her pants. Jake asked me if I could loan her some sweats. I couldn't because I was a size 8 and she was a size 18. Nothing wrong with that, but the point is I realized he made those comments about my weight to try and get me to break up with him because he was a coward. He clearly liked a big gal. Although when he'd said those things to me about my weight, it was 1 a.m., I lived about 95 miles away, and we had just had sex. So I don't know how he thought this would go. Even in hindsight, it perplexes me. Did he think I was going to break up with him and storm off into the night and drive for an hour and a half? Anyway, I emailed his roommates. It was the early 2000s. It's how you communicated anything you didn't want to say on the phone. I wanted to let them know we'd broken up and that they were always lovely to me and thank them for being friends. They both admitted they knew about Meg and were the ones to demand that Jake tell me, or they would. That's when he broke up with me with the lame "you don't understand science" excuse. One of his roommates, a super nice, super cute guy named George, offered to help me get a few things still at their house that he had collected for me away from around the house. He suggested I come up for the weekend, we go out and drink and have a good time, all the things Jake didn't want to waste money on, and I said sure. So I went up and George let me into the house while Jake was gone. I took photos of all of his animals because while I might not be a PhD student, I paid attention and I knew he had an endangered species in his care. He wasn't breeding it, it was an unreleasable animal he had taken in from a rescue organization. There was paperwork he had to submit with a $25 fee and he refused to do it, saying he didn't want the government in his business. I took photos of that animal, all his breeding conditions, and a photo of an animal not allowed in the state, which was in a tank, right next to a window and visible from outside. I then went out for a night on the town with George. We stumbled in early, around midnight, so Jake and Meg, who were watching TV, would see me in a short dress, drunk, and George practically carrying me. I spent the night in George's room. He was a total gentleman, but made sure to leave the room and parade past them in his boxers a few times, and we giggled and moaned loudly so they could hear us. When I went to leave the next morning, Jake said I didn't have to act like a in front of him as I ate a donut slowly in my rumpled dress with messy hair while George beamed at me and then planted a kiss on my head. Meg looked ashamed, not quite knowing where to look, and I said, "Have fun with my leftovers," and walked out. I wanted to think the petty, loud hookup and a few juvenile insults were my revenge. It was not. The next day, I had my photos developed and called the State Office of Fish and Wildlife. I reported the animals in the house, the potential overcrowding of breeding animals, and the 2 animals he shouldn't legally have at all in the state, and asked them how to make a report. Turns out, Jake wasn't well liked by his peers in his program or by his roommates, but I was. George had suggested that he and their other roommate could submit complaints to the university that a TA was sleeping with one of his students and showing her favoritism. The night we were out at the bars, we made sure to tell the story to anyone who they knew. They made sure all the women in his classes knew he was sleeping with Meg. It wasn't a large program, so people knew fast he had cheated and was now dating his student. George and the other roommate made sure people knew they had put in complaints, sick of Jake's entitled BS. With my full statement made and photos sent to the state wildlife officials, I called my friend Mary, Jake's advisor's wife. She knew about the breakup and lame reason, and I let her know he admitted he was sleeping with a student. I'd been emailing with him and he admitted to it in writing, so I sent that to Mary. To say she was not happy about that was an understatement. She said she made sure it would be investigated and told her husband, Jake's direct advisor, while I was on the phone with her. Speaking of investigations, a few weeks later, George called me, giddy, to say state fish and wildlife officials were there confiscating animals. He told them he would be happy to tell them whatever they needed to know. Meg was there when it happened and told the officials as far as she knew, all the animals belonged to her boyfriend Jake and that they were all legal. That put George and the other roommate in the clear. One animal was kept in the backyard, so it was implied to Jake that a neighbor reported it. While they were there to investigate, they knew to look in the back window to see the far more problematic illegal to have in the state under nearly any circumstances animal. Since George was on the lease, he was able to let them in to investigate in the house. The animals were all in communal areas and the officers stayed there for a few hours and returned with a warrant to take all the animals and enter Jake's room to investigate. George and the other roommate let them into their rooms with no issues and were quickly cleared. Meg apparently couldn't get a hold of Jake and eventually drove to the university to find him. Remember, no cell phones yet. It was a good day. The only animals they left were some guppies in a fish tank. Now, PhD students need grant money to do research, and a large part of animal studies funding comes from the federal government. Jake had just gotten an EPA grant right around when he broke up with me, so I called the EPA and asked how I would report that a person with a federal grant was being investigated for illegally harboring endangered animals. Long story short, he lost his EPA grant and had to make restitution on what had already been used, close to $30,000. He would never be able to get another federal grant. He avoided jail time on the state charges since all the animals were in good health, but lost all his breeding animals, worth thousands of dollars, since they were collected for safekeeping during the investigation when the 2 illegal animals were taken. In the end, he owed a $15,000 fine and the 2 animals went to a nearby nature center. For years, I would stop by if I was in the area to visit them. The university revoked his scholarship and fired him from teaching for having an inappropriate relationship with a student. He somehow escaped being expelled, but it always shocked me that he never tried to hide the relationship with Meg and was so stupidly self-assured he didn't even wait the 4 weeks until she would have been done with his class to start publicly dating her. By the university rules, he would have been in the clear to date her, not being her teacher anymore, and she would just have to avoid any classes he was a TA in. It never fails to make me laugh. After a few months, I emailed his sisters and told them I missed them because Jake broke up with me after trying to call me fat and cheating on me, and I felt weird contacting them. The girls told me he told the family I broke up with him because of the distance. I forwarded them emails that Jake wrote after the breakup, talking about how he fell for Meg and he was sorry about it, but it was true. I couldn't keep up with him academically, and it made him attracted to Meg. Jake managed to convince his dad to pay for 1 more year of school so he could get a master's instead of a PhD, and while I stayed in contact with his sisters and brother via email and then social media, I largely let it all go. I got even, made some friends, Mary became like an auntie to me, and I went on with life. I went on to get a master's degree myself, and my specialty, helping scientists and doctors communicate their work to lay people. You know, us dummies who can't remember all the scientific names. I swear it happened by accident, not design, but I love it. And I work with everyone from small-town doctors and nurses to pharmaceutical companies to museums to state and federal governments to film and TV producers. I travel a lot and speak and get to learn a lot of cool things about our planet and how things work. I knew through his siblings that Jake and Meg got married and had 2 kids. Meg dropped out of the sciences and became an accountant, while Jake went back to breeding animals. Every once in a while, his sisters or brother would tell me something over lunch or via text, but we had our own relationship that exists outside of him. Apparently, when I sent a wedding gift for one of his sisters, he loudly complained at a co-ed bridal shower that all of his siblings were still my friends and he didn't make an effort to embrace his now wife Meg. Apparently, the sister just laughed and said, "I don't make it a habit to be friends with homewreckers." This is how Jake's parents found out how their relationship started and ours ended, 10 years after we broke up. Jake never found out I was behind reporting him to the state, and in the end, I didn't lie about a single thing, except maybe exaggerating a drunken makeout session with George, who is now a successful and tenured professor with a lovely wife and daughters. Fast forward about 20 years to a few weeks ago. I was at a university giving a lecture to a room of 250 undergrad and grad students. In the end, I was mingling with the students afterwards and I hear a voice say, "Hey OP, long time no see." And I realize it's Jake, and I didn't change the expression on my face at all. I was completely shocked and my instinct was to play dumb. So I said, "I'm sorry, help me out. Have we met at another workshop or lecture?" He looked incredulous and said, "It's me, Jake." And I said, "I can't place you, but I would love to figure it out." Finally, I gasped and said, "Oh my goodness, Jake. I guess I blocked you out," and said, "Well, lovely to see you," and moved on quickly when he tried to reach out and hug me. I was happy to leave it there with the satisfaction of him seeing me as a guest lecturer in a science department of a major university when he was just in the audience. The department chair and faculty who had invited me to speak took me out to dinner, and while there, one of them said, "So you know Jake?" I said, "I did from over 20 years ago," being vague about how. She went on to tell me he had been there for an interview for a teaching position and had spent a few days there observing, and they were likely going to hire him. I couldn't control it. I scoffed. When they all looked at me, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm just shocked he's teaching after what happened at University X." They said, "What happened?" And I said, "He was sleeping with a 19-year-old student when he was 26, and he had to leave the program without a PhD because he couldn't afford to stay after losing his scholarship." The 3 people I was with all looked at each other like they knew they had a problem and said, "We'll have to look into that," and change the subject. My old colleague Mary called me this weekend to say a friend at the university let her know someone had called doing a background check about Jake, and they pulled his file, which included being fired, leaving the program with a lower degree, and the complaint letters from over 20 years ago about his conduct. Mary's name had been on it with her husband listed as the faculty advisor, so she thought she'd like to know. As a bonus, it had a copy of his arrest record for the illegal animals. I guess his dad had paid for a decent lawyer to get the record expunged after the charges were reduced and he paid the fines, so it doesn't show up on a standard background check. I don't think he's going to get that job. So I will return to my life, content that the universe comes through sometimes, especially if you give it a little nudge now and then. The best revenge is when you don't have to do anything wrong. You just have to help direct knowledge to the right places. If there is anything I can impart to any young women and men reading this as I shimmy happily into my now size 10 pants, it's that if someone who is supposed to love you complains about your weight or looks, that is their problem to fix mentally, not yours. And maybe it's time to check out what they are doing behind your back or simply move on. Remember though, it is their flaw, not yours. If Jake hadn't been a coward and tried to make me break up with him and just ended things with me in a mature way, I might not have found out about Meg and turned his own wickedness back on himself.